Please enjoy this ad-free episode as part of our Academic Integrity series sponsored by Pangram Labs, the world's leading AI detection tool. Try it out at pangram.com. That's PANGRAM.com.
Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. This is Elvin Freitas, co-founder of the EdUp Experience, and we are back on another episode of the Academic Integrity series sponsored by Pangram Labs. And I have with me, as always, the co-host who is the most. He is Bradley Amy, CTO and co-founder at Pangram Labs. Bradley, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Elvin. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Always happy to have you along with the ride. So we're going to get right into it. Here's our guest today. He is Dr. Paul Krouss, and he is a teaching professor and faculty lead for innovative pedagogies at Washington State University Vancouver. Paul, how you doing?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm just glad I got that out. It's like the hardest part for me is always the introduction. So thanks for being with us, Paul. Really appreciate your time. So we like to get right into it. Tell us about, Washington State University, Vancouver, what you do, how you do it. Go for it.
Sure. So Washington State University Vancouver is actually part of the Washington State University system. We're a little bit different that we're actually just one university that is geographically dispersed. And so there are 6 campuses across the state. You can find us in every corner, and including online with our global campus. We, as a campus, as the Vancouver campus, are what would be considered relatively new. I think we were founded in 1989, along with some of the other campuses around the state. It's a beautiful, beautiful area with views of the mountains. It's the homelands of the Cowlitz Indian tribe and the peoples of the Lower Columbia Valley. So we are very happy and honored to be here. We're a PhD granting institution, but relatively small at 2,700 students. But we work, closely across the entire system. We are about 40% first generation students. So we have a fairly high percent of first gen students. And we also are non-residential campus. So we tend to also have a large transfer population from community colleges. So, and a little bit of fun fact, we also have a corpse flower on campus that they bloom every 7 years. They're supposed to they smell terrible. And it's kind of a fun little bit for us.
Cool. Awesome. So I appreciate you providing that context for us. So we're asking everyone the same question. How do you define academic integrity?
Sure. Yeah. That is the $1 million question these days, isn't it? For me personally, I think about intent for the students, right? And I think that that's an important thing to consider. We often think of academic integrity as being a student behavior, thinking about honesty. But I also think intent is really important because academic integrity can range from, simply doing a citation incorrectly all the way to, literally committing fraud. And so that covers a big range of things. And so I think of it with respect to intent, and especially my areas in math. And I think about students who, if you've given an assignment or something like that, a student might actually just look up the answer, see if they can find the answer. But they might really be doing that because they honestly worked on it and they are doing this. They're looking this up to help their learning. And I think about, but we would still, if it's totally copied, you would think about that as an academic integrity issue. But you can also think about the students that use the Get Help features in some of the online homework. If they always are using the Get Help feature, which is, we wouldn't think of that as an academic integrity violation, but the intent really is less about having that productive struggle and learning. And so again, that's why I throw the intent in there. Not that I think that we should be helping guide students to make these right choices and right decisions. But there is a lot of gray area along with the things that are obvious academic integrity issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, that's such a great definition, and I think you're actually the first person to use that word in their definition of academic integrity. We've done like probably like 20 plus of these at this point. So, curious to unpack that a little more. I have so many directions we could take this, but maybe like where we'll go first is, I think like students come to college for a variety of reasons, right? Like I mean, I think like many people like me, like, for me, like my parents always just growing up, they were just like, well, you have to go to college. Like that's just the default. And I never really questioned it. I was just like, yeah, like going to college, like it's the same for me as like going to high school, right? But for many other students, that's not the case. Like I think many other students, they're making a choice whether to go to college or not. They're kind of weighing the value of the degree against like, potentially just going out in the workforce, making immediate income. And so like, I think as professors and educators, like we all have this like kind of like grand idea that our students are in it for like the love of learning and like scholarly pursuit and like, all of these kind of like ideals that we hold dear in academia. But like, many of these students are actually just coming in there for a very like, practical, like, I need to get this degree and get out of here. And like, if I have to like cheat my way, to pass the class, then like that's what I got to do because I'm making an investment in myself and I have to get this degree. Right. And so like when you talk about intent, like, do you see like that kind of intent as like just intentness on getting a degree, as something that, is valid and like, how can you kind of like get through the message of like academic integrity and honesty to like this particular brand of students that's just very like practical minded?
Sure. Yeah. And I think that is a lot of our students exist in both of those worlds that they came to the university because they are looking for authentically a learning experience, but they also need to be practical and considering the population that we have at our campus and that are at many campuses. I think that's also something that we as educators need to be mindful of about understanding the motivations for students. And that helps us design curricula that make that allow those things to go together better. So I wouldn't necessarily think that it's a justification. I'm just here for my degree and so that's, so I can do whatever I want to do. I wouldn't say that. And we do have a responsibility to make sure that their education is authentic. But on the flip side, we really should keep in mind that the motivations for students are just within one classroom will vary from those who are just in it because they really wanted to learn and they have no intention of doing anything else with this versus those who are just very degree focused. So with that being said, I think that it is a great thing for us to keep in mind that not every student is like we were at the university.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my notes, I have you still teaching math, right? You still are, practicing teacher and everything, right?
Yes.
So yeah, if I'm a student in your class and like, you catch me cheating, like I use like, Chegg or like, ChatGPT or whatever to like, do my assignment for me and you catch me and, we get in there, we have a conversation. And I'm just like, Professor Krouss, like, I know that I cheated, like I know what I did was wrong, but like I'm honestly just like too dumb to pass this class, unless like without this kind of assistance. Like what would you say to that student?
Well, I mean, I don't have to be quite so hypothetical because I have had to have those conversations, right? And I would say there are a bunch of things all surrounded in that. One is making sure that you have set up your course so that students can succeed. If you have put in all of these barriers and roadblocks, these unintended barriers, these unintended roadblocks, then that I think gives an incentive to also have people cheat. And we have certainly dealt with this for a long time in math because I would say,
Because math is really hard.
well, no, because interestingly enough, ChatGPT isn't always the best tool for a lot of math courses. It will confidently give you an incorrect answer, but
Yes.
it will sound super pleasant while it's doing it.
I mean, they're language models, they're not number models. Like,
Right.
yeah.
Exactly. So they're not intended for that. However, there are many tools that have already been developed that are good at those things. And so we do deal with that. And in fact, we also deal with that kind of gray area I talked about, where students even are just getting excessive amounts of help and not struggling with the material. So there are a number of things in all of that. Usually, one of the first things that I say, though, is that that if a student is struggling, that first off, these courses are designed to be that they can be successful, that they can pass if they do the work, and we have done our job in placing them correctly, that they are able to be successful. And I also will emphasize, you maybe aren't successful this semester because of just time, and very often if a student is struggling, it's because of things that are happening outside of school. So just letting them know, great, let's try and figure out a strategy so you can be successful the next time. And to really, I don't want to ignore or not listen to what they're saying when they feel like they aren't quote unquote smart enough to pass this class. But it's just making sure that they realize, I think they can pass this class. We will get you the resources that you can and help you with strategies to be successful. So one of the things I think about, though, when I design my courses is knowing that some students are coming in with that attitude, that they are going to try and game the system. And so one of the things that I think about as my role as faculty lead for innovative pedagogies is how to work with faculty to help them think about these things as well. And for me personally, I look at my how I calculate grades, or how I've published that in the syllabus, because grades are the currency of academia, right? And there's that old saying, show me your budget and I'll tell you your priorities. And I think it's the same thing when you look at how you assign a grade. And so in math, we have for a long time had more emphasis on some in-class work. We try and do a lot of things to make it so students can be successful with that in-class work, but it's also something that is valuable because we want students to be fluent in those, or fluid in those skills, so that they aren't a distraction when they're trying to learn something else. But I would say that is another, whole ball of wax that we could just think about in terms of, or is it a can of wax? But that we could think about in terms of how you design your course to get that incentive, or to make sort of the integrity issues less influential.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely like kind of, a mix of science and art here. Like, I mean, I like what you say about like, students like should actually be struggling through the material. Like that's actually like a feature, not a bug. Like my mentor like always used to say to me, like, when you're learning, like you should feel like you're working out. Like it's like the mental equivalent of like going to the gym and like lifting like a weight that like is like just like right at your comfort level, right? Like
Right.
because that's how you build strength, and that's how you build like kind of like the equivalent like mental knowledge and mental skills. If it doesn't feel like it should be hard, then you're not really learning, because it means that you like already knew the material to some degree. But at the
Right.
same time, you don't want it to be so hard that like the student just like gives up, and they're like, oh, like there's no point in me doing this because there's no way that I can get through this. And
Right, absolutely. And, I mean, thinking about that, when we talk about the productive struggle, one of the things is to remove the unproductive things. I have trouble with logins to my textbook. I have trouble with, I'm struggling with the financial aid office. I have transportation issues about getting to campus. Making sure that those things will undermine a student quicker than anything in a classroom, to be honest. And as far as like the material, another thing that I think about, and again, this is maybe where AI can be a fantastic tool that we can start to think about. So I teach a lot of my math courses as flipped courses. I kind of got hooked on it, and just really, a lot of students take to it. It dismayed me how much more they prefer my lectures out of class, but it ends up being just way more effective for students. And I think that that's something that we can think about if we're thinking about student success. what are some of the other things that we can do to make students more successful? And, just thinking about the AI aspect, I had a chance, I just kind of played a little bit with the Google Notebook LM and I kind of dragged a paper that I had worked on with a colleague on flipped classrooms into it, and it made a 15-minute podcast, like in 3 minutes. And if you think about like the giving students multiple ways of accessing material, I think that we can we're going to be able to use some of these AI tools to allow us to give it to them in multiple formats. So students can use more than one and to be successful.
Oh, I love that. And this is like so relevant for like the marginalized groups too, like non-native English speakers, like students with like, like on the spectrum, like neurodivergent students, like, I feel like all of these like classes are classes of people that are, just as smart as everybody else, but just like learn in a different delivery method, might be the best way to put it, so to
Right.
speak.
And when we think about that universal design for learning, and lots of times I think the phrase is trying to get students at the margins. But I would actually argue, and especially in math, that we were never hitting the center of the target. And so it's not that we are necessarily, we shouldn't think of these as people on the margins. It's just that wasn't where we were aiming. And it's because we couldn't. If you think about some of the textbooks that we still use in math, or some of the reference books that are used in other areas, those things, they were books because that's all we had, as opposed to, oh, we could create a podcast to discuss this, or we could create a short documentary, or we could, name all the things, make something interactive. And now with AI, you can also, and I'm thinking, when I think about AI, I don't think necessarily about the generic chat GPTs of the world, but I'm also thinking about things that could be specialized that could really move some of this forward for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to get into your role as kind of the director of the innovative technologies. Like, kind of, what are some of the things that you guys have on the burners?
Yeah, well, I think I would say a lot of what we have that we think about is it kind of falls into two aspects. One is around professional development for pedagogies on campus, which I'm super proud of Washington State University Vancouver for taking that so seriously. We have I've been a beneficiary of taking a lot of workshops that I wouldn't have expected necessarily at every university, and being able to also then provide some of these things where we do deeper dives, or we do things for newer faculty, just to try and make it so that we're not always reinventing the wheel over and over. Another thing that we do is we think about technologies in the classroom. And so that's probably where most of my AI thinking has kind of gone, because we have access to Microsoft Copilot on campus. I don't know that it's being used very widely as a technology, but I do. One of the things I think about is how I can work with faculty to not necessarily just come up with we're going to ban all of AI, or you're free to use it however you want, but to think, be thoughtful about how do we redesign our courses? How do we think about our courses, assess our courses in a different way that incorporates this? This is going to become an expectation in the not so distant future. This is something that folks are going to be expecting of graduates from college. And so how can we start to embrace it as well? And so starting to think about professional development opportunities.
Yeah, of course. And obviously, like, both of those are like not good outcomes. Like, ban all AI from the class, that's not good. But also, like, give students like absolutely like unrestricted access for everything, that's also probably not the best either. So yeah, how do you kind of like, if I were like kind of a new faculty and kind of like, I have no AI in my like, English writing class or my world history class, like, how would you kind of start the conversation with me on like, okay, like, what are the ways that we can like bring AI in a positive way?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I always would start with is what is it that you want your students to walk away with? after the semester is done. So AI, not AI, there's all sorts of tools out there. And so ask yourself, like, what is it that you actually want to have your students walk away with? I mentioned before, I think it is really important to think about the how you are assessing students. And so there's a couple things. One, I talked about just the grades as currency, setting up how you are assessing and really knowing that they authentically are either getting these skills or taking away this knowledge from your class. Thinking about assessment strategies, and these could include some AI attributes as well. Right, back in the old days, I guess I'll say old days, but it was always just an in-class exam, right? And then projects. And now that's gotten to be complicated. And so if you are concerned about, and again, I think we need to separate academic integrity and assessment security. Those are two separate things, really. But it would be thinking about assessment security. How can you be certain that what you are assessing is accurate for your students? So then we finally then get to arrive at like the fun, how might you incorporate some AI things into your course. And I think some of these have a limited shelf life, to be honest with you, but things like asking AI something and then critiquing AI's response, right? So as opposed to just accepting it or rejecting it totally, take it as okay, what kind of feedback would you give to AI, whichever engine you happen to be using. I thought it was interesting. This was now probably almost 2 years ago. There was a faculty kind of university-wide faculty gathering, and it was around syllabus creation, and there was a part about making more welcoming language. And so they had kind of an attendance policy that was very brutally worded. And so they asked, folks to work on making it worded more nicely. And a number of people, this was kind of new ChatGPT, they asked ChatGPT to make this more friendly. And so it absolutely did exactly that. But taking a step back, and what is perhaps the skill that we're going to want to get our students to is that wasn't really the right question, because that attendance policy, now worded nicely, was still actually not a great attendance policy, right? And so did you pause?
AI coat of paint on the language, yeah.
I mean, AI answered the question or did the task it was assigned, so great, but it never, but we are going to be responsible for asking the right questions. And so, lots of times when we have students that come to us and they ask us a question, we often ask a question back to see what is the real question we should be looking at, or helping them form that question, right? And I think that that's also something that we can bring into the classroom about, okay, so we're going to ask AI this. Do you just let AI lead the discussion and go down the rabbit hole, or are you driving this and questioning and asking different questions, bringing different points of view in?
Yeah, definitely. And I like that example of the syllabus language too, because I feel like actually our society is kind of moving in this direction where like we actually might start valuing like plain language more, like plain, like clear, like concise language that says like exactly what you mean. Because AI is great at just taking that and just like ballooning it up to like, this like monstrosity of like adjectives and like confusing adverbs that like sound kind of sophisticated superficially, but really just don't mean anything at all. And so,
yeah, I started as a project for myself. I thought, okay, because I don't get to use it as much as I would maybe want to for classroom stuff. So I assigned myself a task of writing an intro to a murder mystery type of thing. And it was the most generic page filling, and I couldn't, it obviously there's a reason writers are valued, and not just doing that, but it wasn't very good at all. It just kind of filled the page. But we do need to also make sure that we're being critical of the questions that are being asked, right? And that is something that I think that will also start to be valued by employers. I think about tasks like when you mentioned the writing and plain language. I used to work in technology area, and user manuals are, variations are, don't get too crazy. You want to be very predictable writing.
Right.
This is maybe something now that AI would be a great assistant, and we would want our students to be able to use those tools to create a user manual and allow it to be updated and have the right references and all of those things. So I think that there are a lot of different ways that it can be used depending on the discipline, and it will become an industry tool for many people in the upcoming years.
Yeah, absolutely. I like what you're saying about like kind of like asking the right questions and like being critical of AI, because those are actually kind of the like downstream skills that like we're going to value when AI has all the right answers. So actually we do talk to a lot, like, through our work, like we mostly actually talk to like kind of writing and humanities people, but you as a math person, I'm kind of curious like how you use AI, to get students to engage that critical thinking and engage, ask what you said, like asking the right questions. So like, what's an example of like how you personally use AI in the math classroom?
I have not. I will say that I have most of my examples are not great yet. So
Okay.
I'll just be frank and honest about it. I was especially interested in trying to incorporate it into a linear algebra course that I teach, and because linear algebra ends up being the backbone of the AI engines, and it fails to answer linear algebra questions routinely.
Really?
Oh, it gets it wrong all the
Like
time.
Copilot?
Copilot, all of them. I've tried.
Really?
Well, I can't say all of them. Probably a better use of this will be because there are some very good engines for doing this type of work. That the AI will be the interface. And then, so you will have this user-friendly interface to then reference an engine that actually knows how to do these things correctly and confidently. So AI always would, I would ask it for, give me 5 vectors in R6 and something, and with these properties, and it would just throw up these vectors, and it's like, there you go, you're welcome. And I'd say, well, actually, it does not have these properties, and it goes, oh, you're right.
Oh,
and
you're absolutely right. That's my favorite. Yeah.
and then it would fix a couple of them, but it actually, it still wouldn't be correct, right? So there's that. I think actually there is also an application, and I haven't had a chance to put this into some of the classes that I do, but where you can, some of the applied problems that you can do in a maybe more introductory class, you can start to get over some of the when we talk about unintended barriers, some of the hurdles of introing a new topic or area. So an example I tried was working up was around piecewise functions. We teach this in college algebra. It's just one of the more dry things that you could possibly teach. And I'm sure many students look and think, when would I ever use this? And it turns out you would use this for calculating overtime pay. And then, then all of a sudden you could ask AI, like, what are different ways people calculate overtime pay, and what happens when there's a vacation day or there's a holiday and things like that. And AI actually gave a really great answer and some descriptions. It gave a terrible formula for it. So that would still be the students' work, but they wouldn't have to necessarily put on their HR hat and think of all these different ways, especially if these are not experiences that students have had. So I think that it can help. It can help make some of those things a little bit more interesting when you are trying to do more applied things. But again, in math specifically, it has not been always the greatest tool. That it's not the one I would go to.
Yeah, very understandable. And I know that OpenAI also, like, they're very self-aware of this, which is why I think, like, a lot of their future development is, like, getting, O3 and O3 Pro to better use tools. Because, why, like, bake the calculator into the weights of a 400 billion parameter neural net when the AI can just access a calculator and do it that way? And so, yeah, I think,
I am hopeful for the AI course assistant type of model as just not replacing anything, but as another tool where, because I think students are going to, whether they want to or not, they're going to run into AI everywhere. You have done it yourself. When you go into the search engine, you search something and you get the AI overview, and you're, whether you want it or not. And so avoiding it is actually soon to be a moot point because you can't avoid it. So that's where I think, if a student is struggling on something, whether it's in, whatever course in history or math or wherever, if they're struggling with something and they type it into just a generic search engine, they're going to maybe get more than they wanted or more than they asked for. Whereas if it's an embedded course assistant that understands the objective of the assignment or the project, that course assistant might be able to do a better job of guiding students to authentically do the work and for them to do the work in the way that the student actually wants to do it.
Yeah, very interesting. Like, where kind of do you see the gap as between today's technology and what like the ideal AI course assistant for you would look like?
I think right now and that they are still there. I think they're prone to making a lot of the same mistakes that can be made in the classroom, where, when you're helping students, the ability to listen to a student, the ability to think of what question also the student might have wanted to ask. So because they haven't formed it yet. So that just goes right back to that syllabus statement where if you go up to AI and ask, oh, can you rewrite this so it sounds a little bit nicer? And it'll do that. But actually, the real thing you want to do is say, oh, what do you think about my attendance policy? Let's get that underlying thing first, and then let's keep going. And I think an AI tutor then that is very geared towards a course or a field is going to be able to better do that. Like, what are some of these kind of probing questions? Again, not in isolation, not replacing teachers, not replacing active classrooms, not replacing any of these other things that are best practices. But it can help. I think create and get past the first level so that when a student is ready to engage with either the professor or their peers or they're in the classroom that they're further along.
Oh yeah, I totally know what you mean. Like I actually did like a physics undergrad, and it was like really hard for me. Like it was like very difficult, like in general. Like I found myself like going to office hours like all the time, like asking my TAs for help. And like, you walk into office hours and like the first thing that you ask the TA is like, I don't know how to do this. How do I do this? And then like, if I were to ask the same thing to ChatGPT would be all like, oh, certainly, let me tell you exactly how to do this, and then give me a like step-by-step answer on how to do that. But that actually doesn't really help me learn anything. Like that just like gives me the answer outright. And so like I feel like nobody or at least not any tool that I'm aware of is actually like, kind of molding the AI to be like, okay, like rather than exactly telling me how to do the problem, like what are the right ways to just get me unstuck?
Well, and I
And just
think
get me thinking. Yeah.
Khan Academy is looking at, I think the Conmigo tool is looking at that. We should definitely keep our eye on the K through 12 space. I think that is where that is going to get developed first, more than anything. I remember hearing a PBS report about the New York school district creating chatbots essentially to help students get the first round of feedback on essays. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, but the point wasn't just to give generic feedback, but it was giving feedback in the style of the individual professor. So I think that's where these things are going. So if you have a super highly enrolled course at your university, it's maybe worth you then developing some of these course assistants that would help specifically with those courses. So whatever that course that that first research project is part of, that would be something that I think a lot of students struggle with, and that they would benefit with these tailored course assistants.
Yeah, definitely. I love the personalization. Like, do you see a world in which like, you guys kind of digitize all of your courses and like get all the material in like some format that like a AI chatbot could understand? and then like kind of like have these because like yeah, I mean we just like kind of bought into this actually at Pangram. Like we actually just hooked up like Notion's LLM to all of our internal documentation, and now you just have a chat GPT that understands like all of Pangram's like internal stuff. And so kind of curious, I feel like this could naturally like very much expand to like MIT OpenCourseWare or like, you know, custom online courses. Like it just makes sense to like have it so closely connected there.
Yeah, I think one thing that I learned in doing flipped courses, so I've been doing this for a little bit over a decade now, is just how important the active learning part is, and especially in math. That is where people learn by doing, not by just watching me do it at the board. And I think that that is also a place where just talking about the things that you were mentioning. The first thing I thought of is what kind of space does that open up for your in-person time in classroom? What can you do? What can you now do in the classroom? What do you now have time to do that before you could not? And so all of those sort of passive learning experiences that still have some place, but if anything that we can really start to move away and get more active learning things happening in the classroom, I think is always a win. And so I could see that also a course assistant or taking a course and having some of the lecture material that isn't quite there for you can't quite just make a video series on it and have that work. You want some interaction, but if that course assistant really could actually provide that first level interaction, then all of a sudden you could be at the next level when you are in the classroom. And so I think that would be super exciting to do, a lot of fun to do. I think those tools right now would be hard for an individual instructor to create or to do. But I also don't know that it's that far off that they will be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like probably the next evolution, and just takes, maybe a smart startup or something to come up with a great product around it.
Well, and again, I think looking at the K through 12 space, because especially with these, the standards and the curriculum that they have, that they will, and that also, frankly, that's where probably more of the money is. That is where that we will start to see some of those things there. But it will, again, it'll open up things. I think we also, thinking of K through 12, we also, we always say that, but we really need to pay attention this time. What are the expectations of students who are now going through K through 12? What are they going to be? All of a sudden, if they came from a place where we've been using these tools and they run into, this is forbidden. I think that is also going to be that it doesn't work for the students for us to not be coordinated and to not have those discussions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I gotta jump in. This has been a great conversation, but we gotta wrap up. So sorry. All right, Paul, I'm gonna ask you the last question. We're asking everyone the same question. What do you see as the future of academic integrity, Paul?
I think it's the same as it was before. I think that we have been running up against this for quite a long time, and I think this is just another step in it. So. Again, I like to think about the intent, and I hope that we can certainly think about that with students, and especially as we really try and broaden who we reach out to, and as we talked about, like what the motivations are for students and things like that we think more deeply about how we can have a student and instill in them what's authentic to their learning, and to make sure that, because really they are still paying for this learning. I mean, sometimes I think some students will view it as, I'm paying to get a degree and so I can go out and do something, but really most of them are here to learn and to have value in their education, and I think they still want it. And so for us, if we can make that value clear to students, and I think that the integrity follows.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for those insights. This has been a great conversation. I'm going to outro my co-host, who is the most. He is Bradley Amy, CTO and co-founder at Pangram Labs. Thank you as always, Bradley.
Thank you so much, Elvin. This was fun.
Yeah, totally. I know you had a fun time with this one, like about math. Right up your alley. I could see you light up. That was great. So I want to outro our guest today. He is Dr. Paul Krouss, and he is teaching professor and faculty lead for innovative pedagogies at the Washington State University Vancouver. Thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
So with that, ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd.
Thank you for listening. This episode is part of our Academic Integrity series sponsored by Pangram Labs, the world's leading AI detection technology. Try it out at pangram.com. That's PANGRAM.com.